a good woman in the 21st century that's able to stay in a country where we don't hold government to account, where we don't ask for legislative accountability, and we expect for quotas to change. Talk to me about the quotas, and particularly women, I mean, in board levels, even Fortune 500 have a huge task ahead for empowering 100 women by 2025. Where are we in South Africa with numbers?
Yeah, I mean, in South Africa, we have no legislation that requires quotas. And I think that the excuse that at some point as a country we come up with is to say that whenever you introduce quotas, then the risk is that numbers are filled and we begin to chase numbers. And therefore that becomes an easy excuse. And so I do think that what the JSE has done in order to, at a start level, begin to introduce a requirement for a policy around gender diversity is a good start. But like I said earlier, in our country, unless something is legislated, it's not going to move. BE is a classic example.
Absolutely. But here's the opportunity for young women in the room and those who are in the legislative frameworks, people like us who are hustling, who don't have jobs. I mean, these are the areas that we can move into and hold accountability into.
Exactly.
And I think these are the low-hanging fruit.
Exactly.
Because, you know, I'm sure like you, we are in many gender parity groups. We're fighting for women's rights, the end to violation of children's rights. But I don't think as women we're taking our economy seriously. What do you think about that?
I think we do take our economy seriously. I think we do. I think that the structural dynamics in which we operate make it all the more complicated for women. I think that the societal dynamics in which we operate make it all the more complicated for women. And hence I was saying that a lot of us women still feel as though in order to progress in business, in order to get where we want to, there is a requirement to sacrifice.
And I hear you. What I'm also saying about policy, right, and legislation, is that we seem to be mediocre in settling for something that could legislatively bring parity to us.
You are correct. That you are absolutely correct about.
And that is the narrative we need to push forward for economic parity. You talk of diversity of economies. Shouldn't that be the starting point?
Exactly, that should be. It is the same imperative as raised to women as it is to youth.
And 100%. And I think when Sam asked me to be here, you know, I'm a journalist by profession, and I look at fees must fall. And you know, this is a dynamic time in Africa and around the world, and we look at how movements are being held to account. We look in New Zealand how the Prime Minister breastfeeds in Parliament because she wants to. And so I reckon, Dineo, with strong women like you, and particularly because you know quotas are relevant, and you know policy and gender equity is about numbers and data analytics, how do we hold the JSE to account then if there's no policy in place?
Well, it is the companies that need to account. And so I think what we then begin, the step one that we've seen is a requirement for a policy.
Right.
The second step that we need to see is a requirement for quota, minimum levels of 30%, because that is the percent that has been proven to show impact. So we need to be able to say, yes, it's good to have a policy, but let's have a quota attached in that policy, and let's have some punitive measures for not meeting those quotas.
So let's put a day in your life. You're an executive, you sit in board meetings, you call for punitive measures, right? And then you have an entrepreneur like me, and I think, gosh, these are women executives empowered, and buying power still does not lie within our hands. What kind of decision-making collaborations are women executives having right now? And what is your solution to intentionally build the bridge? What kind of programs have we have in place? You weren't expecting these questions today.
You know, I think for me, two things. The first is that when you sit at a board as a woman, first you need to make it your business to understand what are the policies in the company and how do they impact women. For example, the maternity leave policies. Are they positive for women?
Right.
Do they make it possible for women to actually raise their kids and be able to be at work? The pay policies. are women and men being paid equally for the same job? So you need to make it your business to understand these dynamics. And then secondly, from a practical day in my life perspective,
Right.
it is to intentionally ensure that when we take in young people, for example, we have an internship program, we have to make sure that at least 50% of those are young girls, are young women. We have an academy where we train young kids out of matric who cannot have money to go to university. We at least ensure that 50% of them are women. So we are deliberate in how to advance women in our own business, and I'm deliberate about it because I'm a woman and I was raised by a single woman, and I know the incremental impact that women have when they are in the place where they can fend for themselves.
And I like the fact when I read about your mentoring. That is positive. You dynamically position yourself as a champion for mentoring. How important is it for mentoring? And let's talk about levels of mentoring. Do we have mentoring? We're talking about the C-suite, we're talking about boardrooms, executives. Do we have enough of that in South Africa for women participation in mainstream economies?
I don't think we do, to be honest. I really don't think we do. I don't think we are seeing enough of women coming forth to avail themselves, to avail their time. And I myself am still getting mentoring. I myself am still getting coaching.
So we heard that, ladies.
You know, and so I get coached by men, I get coached by women, I get mentored even by younger women.
Yeah, and, you know, it's so important when Winnie Mandela passed away. I mean, the movement around women's rights, everybody still remember there was Nelson Mandela in the country, because her positioning in leadership was so enormous. In terms of the elections next year, we're going into 2019. There are huge struggles. Unemployment is at its peak. Youth employment doesn't even exist. What kind of challenges do you guys have in your boardrooms right now in the capitalistic side of South Africa?
You know, I think all of South Africa recognizes the huge challenge that is faced around youth unemployment.
Right.
Hence, programs such as the Yes has been put in place. That's why my perception is that boardrooms all around South Africa are grappling with the fact of how do we begin to bring young people into the organization. The reality is that the economy is not doing well, holistically. And therefore it becomes quite a challenge in terms of how do we bring in young people, train them, benefit from their intellect, from their experiences, and from their freshness of mind. Because what we're looking for is these fresh minds, these millennials who really think differently from us who were born in the late 70s, you know. And so what the challenge is how do we begin to merge all of those and have programs that make it possible for more and more young people to come into the mainstream economy. And so I think a lot of organizations are doing a lot, but there's still a lot more that can be done. But the other factor that we cannot ignore is the education system of our country. I think that the education system of our country has failed us in a way that has made the people who come out in some ways disadvantaged in order to be able to access the opportunities that are there.
And you talk of education, I mean, I look at someone like me. You know, in my late 40s, I went to business school. And there's such a disadvantage of women not knowing how to play on the playing fields. In terms of business, we taught of how to go into law, how to do nursing. Is there a formula to navigate around in terms of planning and, you know, just positioning you as a woman leader to wanting to get into board levels? Unpack that for us, please.
Well, I would say 3 things. I would say the first is, as a person, imagine yourself as Dineo Incorporated. I'm now the company. And therefore, in this company called Dineo Incorporated, who are the board of directors around me? Who are my advisors? And therefore, surround yourself with those people who become your advisors, your mentors, your coaches, because you are now the company as a person. And then secondly, I would say that you have to be at a point where you are fully understand who you are. You see, we are not trying to be men.
Yes.
We're not trying to be like men. We're trying to be who we are. And so it is super important that you understand who you are That is the only way that you can bring the best of yourself forth in an authentic way, in the best way possible. If I take me for an example, I'm an introvert by nature. If I try to be like a man, I will try to be all out there, charming, speaking a lot, all over the show. I'm not that. That's not where I get my strength and my power.
Right.
And therefore, I understand who I am, and I play to my own strengths in the best way that I can.
So emotional well-being is important in the quantum of how you lead. Is that important?
It's super important. It's super important to be comfortable in your own skin, to be comfortable with who you are, and be the best version of yourself. There is no other person like you.
So in Global Entrepreneur Week, young women like you, and we laud you and we thank you for carrying that big load, particularly in the executive levels. What help would you like to see us women at the bottom end coming straight up to the top? What kind of initiatives do you think we are not doing and we're missing the boat?
The one thing I would say is around the girls in our schools. I think a lot more of us can do a lot more to talk to the girls in our schools. What I mean specifically is that when you go to township schools versus suburban schools, the girls in township schools don't have all that the girls in suburban schools have. And so I think we need to appear more, talk more, be visible, and show ourselves as role models.
So grooming for young leaders starts from school level. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
I want to know from you, Dineo, in your executive management decision making, what kind of opportunities are you creating for women-owned businesses? What kind of barriers are you making or holding account to the boards you sit on? You come from Tebe, you're now at a big company, you sit on various executive boards, you engage with women leaders who can make a difference, and you speak about breaking down barriers. Talk to us about this.
So I think firstly what we need to, at least what we do, I mean I'm lucky that I came from Tebe because it's an organization that believes in profit for purpose. And therefore I've carried that forward wherever I go. What we do in our organization is we run enterprise supply development programs. And through these programs, we ensure that women are given opportunities to do business with the company. In addition to that, the company created 2 enterprise supply development companies that are 100% women-owned. And so that is what we do from a practical level in our own business.
So you talk of ESD spend, you talk about empowerment. Frustration levels about who's actually part of mainstream economy. Are white women benefiting more than black women in this country, or is that all hogwash? Are those days over? Who's answering in the room, guys?
No, there's still more half of it. A lot more.
And like we're all black women in this room, is this conversation still happening? And like with women as Dineo, as gatekeepers in these organizations, when I look at property companies, when I look at JSE listed companies, why don't we have a voice, Dineo? Is it because we don't have money, we don't have investments? Where are the gaps and how do we get into those gaps? How do we move the begging bowl?
I think the critical mass is not there in terms of voice. I think the critical mass is not there in terms of representation of women at the relevant positions. Because when you are one woman out of 10, let's assume you are one black woman out of 10, you are the only one who has an experience of what it is to live in a cuckoo. That's true. Okay, and so it takes an incremental voice in order to begin to shift the needle. And so we need to push towards more and more and more and more. We can't continue to see the same faces, the same people. Where are the young people? Where are the young women? Where are the 22-year-olds, the 25-year-olds? That's what we need to see. We need their voices.
I also think what we often don't see, and I don't know whether you agree with me, is our buy and spend and our buying power. We need to buy from women-owned businesses.
Yeah.
We need to invest in women-owned banks. We need to make sure that when we have opportunities, we take women-owned businesses. Is that the way to do it?
That's definitely, I totally agree with you. I mean, I came to a point in my life, even buying a car, I asked myself, I'm buying a car from a country where's that money going where? And I'm like,
So these
Be
are the,
very careful. This is just my own personal convictions as to where do I spend my money.
and
where
I
is
think,
it going?
and I think this I mean, if you're tweeting about it in Global Entrepreneur Week 2018, I think we as African women, we may not be engaged in boardrooms, our quotas don't allow us in, legislatively we are sidelined, but 2018, the 21st century, surely we need to take the gauntlet, we need to take the bull by the horns and move the conversation. Tell me about your mentoring and how we can get involved.
I mean, what I do in my personal capacity, a number of women that I give my time to talk to around their own wanting to develop their careers and progress. So that's how I give my time. We have a women's forum in T-Systems. The purpose of that forum is to really have conversations such as these, where women can be able to say, you know what, I'm in a department where so-and-so earns more than me, and we do the same work. How do I address this? And I don't solve problems for women. We just talk and let them solve their problems through conversation. Because why it is important that we don't think somebody else is going to solve our problems is the whole thing of empowerment versus taking power in our own hands. Empowerment means that somebody needs to come and empower us while we wait to be empowered. Whereas if we take the power in our own hands, we can move the needle for ourselves.
In terms of conversations and narratives, are there stories that success stories that are going by the radar and not coming through the system that you in your circles of leadership think that we need greater exposure to be able to implement those solutions?
I think so. I mean, I think there are many women who are succeeding in business. This room is evidence of that.
It's a fabulous room, and give yourself a round of applause.
For the first time in our country, we have a woman leading a bank.
Absolutely.
That is fabulous. For the first time in our country, we had a woman leading an audit firm. For the first time in the history of the organization that I lead, I was the first woman managing director globally.
So these are the kinds of powerful narratives that we need to tell, and that we need to take. I mean, making time for women because the conversation is so executive driven. In terms of education, we spoke about education and education as a little child. I think there's a huge gap in business education for women entrepreneurs. Is that something that you are looking at forwardly in your organization?
Yeah, so what we do with our ESD program, part of it is the teaching, the coaching, and the mentoring of the entrepreneurs that are in the program. And so you are right to say that there is a gap, because some of it is really around how do you run business, how do you run it efficiently, how do you market the business. And through our programs, we have such opportunities available to those who are in that program.
And the president talks about an NDP 2030 plan, escalating business, etc. In terms of driving change through leadership and legislation, having more women-owned or more businesses run by executives or more boardroom access to women, what do you think this does in terms of the diversity? Is it more diversity to income streams? Is it parity to leadership? What do you think, what problems do we solve?
I think we solve two problems. I think we solve the problem of girls having the ability to foresee a future for themselves where they're able to have economic freedom. And why it is super important for girls to foresee a future for themselves where they're able to have economic freedom is that the societal problem of dependency on men is solved.
Did you hear that? Yes. And I think in terms of looking at a timeline of when this can happen, you need to start these processes yesterday. You need to start economic empowerment as early as possible. Now, in terms of your pearls of wisdom and your gems that you can share with us, are we nearly done? In terms of, before we end, there are women sitting here. I don't know if there's anybody wanting any questions, but tell us about the pearls of wisdom from your vantage that we as women are not enabling ourselves with, and the opportunities from, you wish you could tell us to just step into.
saw a picture of, someone was talking about a picture of a gymnast,
Right.
how a gymnast moves from one pillar to the next. And they were saying that that gymnast needs to actually let go of this pillar in order to get to the next. And in between is space.
Sure.
And so in order to get to the next, you actually have to have the faith, the belief, and the conviction within yourself that you can get to the next once we have let go of the first and be in the space to get to the next. And so for what I would say is that don't be afraid of the in-between. Because without the in-between, you cannot get to the next pillar.
Did you hear that, guys? Your last point. Tell us about, Mom, what inspires you and how do you find the time to do all that you do?
No, it's not easy. Hence I said when I spoke that it is important that we have support structures that can enable us to do what we do and not choose between family and career or business. So it's really not easy. And society as it stands today isn't at that point. Society isn't at a point where women are seen as being capable of doing anything. So what I have done in my own life is really just try to be present in the moment. When I'm home, I'm home. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. I don't try and do everything all at the same time. I try and fully engage where I am at that moment. And so make sure that when I'm home, I'm fully home.
Did you hear that, guys? I've learned so much before I wrap up. Firstly, a number of things that touched me about Dineo. One, she arrived. She arrived on time. She leads by example because she said, you can't do it by yourself. I see she came with someone from her team. And for me, that's important. She spoke about the quotas. She spoke about legislation, and she also took time to prepare. So in Global Entrepreneur Week 2018, because of Dineo, we now know that legislatively, government can get away with anything in this country because there isn't policy driving them to hold them to account to say these are the quotas. Because of Dineo, I now know Norway has 40% board members as a legislative requirement. I also like to thank you for your mentoring and your opportunities you create through your ESD. In terms of how people can engage with you further, is there a hashtag that we follow, or do you close up after this?
Yes, I think that there is live tweets going on, and of course, anyone who wishes to make contact with the company can do so with our procurement division in order to find out more about these programs.
And they can join you for coffee somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us to Global Entrepreneur Week 67 CEO. Sam, are you here? Okay, so thank you, Dineo. Are we done here? No more questions?
5 minutes, please.
Question, 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Who's doing questions, guys? It's my eyesight, you see. Can you hear her? No.
Yeah,
I just have a question for Dineo regarding seeing that she's the managing director of T-Systems. Is there anything that, or any programs that you guys are currently having for female entrepreneurs who've got some tech ideas or applications and apps, and they need some kind of financial assistance? Is there any program that you guys have for female entrepreneurs wanting to go into tech?
So we don't have a program that is specific to female entrepreneurs. Our program is around small business through this ESG program that we have. And so if you want to participate, then you can make contact with us through that program.
Thank you very much. My name is Vanessa
that you are a very powerful woman. But one thing that I want you to advise us is how are you overcoming the challenges of being a mother? The challenges of being in leadership as a non-executive director, as well as being a managing director. The second question I had, you emphasize the point where we empower young girls and young women, especially up to the age from 25 downwards, especially maybe let's go in primary school and high school. Since what we have a challenges where in rural areas, most girls are having challenges of sanitary towels. Is there any program in place that you are having or any initiative that which you are supporting that which maybe you might need some support with? Or if one is to initiate that, are you willing to offer the mentoring, the coaching, even if financially?
Okay, I'll start with the second one because it's easier.
Everybody wants something. Yeah.
So, in terms of, you mentioned the point of girls in rural areas. So yes, we do have a program that we are doing. We partnered with Hazy View, an organization called the Good Work Foundation. We've developed Hazy View Learning Center. At the center in Mpumalanga and Hazy View, what we do is we train young people in ICT skills. What we've then done is, and we also train school kids in ICT skills. You have grade 6 kids who are coding.
Wow, and coding is the way to go.
In Hazy View. And so that's the kind of work that we are doing in partnership. We've also developed a call center in Hazy View where our customers are able to have service desks in that rural area. So there is a number of activities that we are doing. So when you talk specifically around items like sanitary towels, yes, we would be willing to do that. We've done it in the past, and we can do it as well going forward. To your second question, I think everybody has their own recipe. Everybody has their own way about what works for them and how to cope. The important thing is to have a support structure and coping mechanisms and lots of prayer in between.
Psalm 91. Psalm 91 is a good one. Yeah. Do you all agree on that one? Yes. You have a question?
No, we're done.
We're done. Okay, what's happening next week? So we're off this panel right now. Please give Dineo Molefe a big hand.